Good day, viewers. My name is Judith Roberts, and this is Israel Roberts, my daughter. I am a social worker, and I work in the field of employee wellness. And so basically offering mental health services amongst other services to different employees of different companies and helping to support their mental health and their overall well-being. If I think about how the lockdown has impacted people, I think some of the experiences have been, or the experiences have been both positive and negative. In terms of the positive experiences, I think most people were able to spend more time with their family members, more quality time with their family members. And I definitely think that has had a positive impact for many people. I have had people reporting that they have connected with their loved ones, their spouses, their kids in ways that they never had before. They've reported that they have had intimate conversations that they wouldn't have had previously or didn't have previously. And so in terms of literally being forced to stay indoors and to stay with your immediate family or your close circle has been positive in that way. The flip side of that being that some people were forced to stay indoors with people who they don't necessarily have very good relationships with. They've been forced to stay in a home or in a space where there is conflict, where there is substance abuse, where there are really difficult psychosocial issues and relational issues. And so for many people, they've struggled being sort of isolated in the most difficult part of their lives, which for some people have been their household or the home. So in terms of the negative experiences, definitely there were those who were significantly challenged by having to stay at home under difficult circumstances. And then also we've had many people who have relapsed. So those who were recovering alcoholics or drug addicts or any where there was any kind of substance dependence have found it difficult to access resources or the normal coping mechanisms. So for those people who would normally go to gym or even have their weekly AA or NA meetings. So their support groups weren't necessarily in those initial stages available for support. And so we have had some people who, because they weren't able to access their normal support structures or mechanisms, they had relapsed. And so we have seen quite a bit of that coming through. And then also in terms of mental health challenges, there have been people who have previously suffered with things like anxiety disorder or OCD, for example, relapsing because of, because if you look at OCD, a lot of the work that a therapist would do would be around them rationalizing. So looking at how rational is it for me to have these fears. And you can imagine for somebody, for example, who has a fear of germs, and all of a sudden, they're bombarded with the fact that you need to sanitize, you need to social distance, you shouldn't be touching surfaces unnecessarily. You need to be covering your coughs and sneezes and things like that. You can imagine what type of trigger COVID has been for an individual who may be struggling with that particular mental health challenge. And so I think the impact has been varied for so many people, and definitely both in a positive way, but also in a negative way in some circumstances. And so it's definitely had a psychological impact on people. I think there are so many people who are still struggling with the isolation, for example. So yes, Some people may feel, may have enjoyed that they were able to stay home with their families, they were crafting, they were playing board games, they were connecting. But there's also the part of the population who are living alone, and who have felt extreme isolation and extreme loneliness. And it's really sort of caused so many people to have, episodes of depression, or feeling really sad and down and disconnected from the world. And I think that's definitely one of the psychological impacts that people have had. An increase in people reporting higher levels of anxiety. So many people reporting with things like panic attacks and increased anxiety, where they have never had issues around managing their anxiety before, or where they've never needed to seek mental health support, or even ask their GP or psychiatrist for things like calming tablets or anti-anxiety meds, antidepressants, or things like that. So we've definitely seen an increase in anxiety, depression, where people are also negatively impacted by being isolated. And so that's definitely been a psychological impact that we've observed, or that I've observed in my work. It really, and I think it's been so difficult in terms of balancing your physical health, your mental and emotional health, but then also ensuring that you're not exposed and you're not putting yourself or your family members at risk. And so I feel like there's this constant, sit still there. I feel like this is the realities of working from home and being in a house together. But I feel like there's this constant conflict between, do I see other people? I really crave conversation with my peers, and I really crave being in the presence of other people and wanting to have conversations and laughs. Sorry about that. But there's this conflict between the need that I have to connect with other people, but then also keeping myself and my family members safe. And so I feel like that's been really, really difficult. And it's almost a constant battle between making that decision. And the reality is that people have approached how they safeguard themselves, and if they safeguard themselves from COVID-19, very differently. So I've got friends, colleagues, family members who view it very differently, who was still connecting with others, who felt comfortable to go to public spaces when it was allowed. And I've got some family members and friends who have sort of remained on level 5 lockdown to date. And so I think that's also caused a little bit of conflict and challenge in different relationships, different friendships, where you, for example, would have a friend requesting to come and visit, or that you visit, or that you meet for coffee, and one party saying, you know what, I don't quite feel comfortable with that, and the other party saying, you know what, you're overreacting, this is a conspiracy theory. And so there's also been quite a bit of challenge where people have been saying, look, my partner thinks that I'm overreacting, or my best friend is saying that I'm really being unnecessary about how cautious I am, and I really just need to speak to somebody about my decision making for how I'm keeping myself safe and my family members safe as well. So there's been quite a few challenges as well. So if we look at some of the challenges that counsellors have been facing, initially definitely being able to provide services. So if we're looking at in the beginning stages of COVID, where it was level 5 lockdown, everyone was meant to stay home. I think there was quite a bit of anxiety for counselors and therapists around how do I support my clients? How do I support somebody who was in the midst of therapy and, in a very vulnerable space? And all of a sudden, we are unable to meet. We can do check-in calls, but it's not quite the same as sort of meeting with somebody face-to-face in their office and, doing different sort of therapeutic techniques. So I think for counselors, definitely initially that was a challenge, but also a major challenge for counselors is around, wanting to keep myself safe, my family safe, and sort of that choice of, do I expose myself and my family when we were able to sort of step out into the workplace again? Is it safe for me? I want to help my clients. I want to offer support to those people who need it, but I also need to safeguard myself. So definitely a lot of those. And I think it got much better where we were able to offer virtual counseling sessions and we were able to have access to all of these platforms. It definitely did address it. But in the beginning, it was really a challenge in terms of supporting individuals from a practical standpoint, and then obviously having to make those difficult decisions about your well-being versus the client's well-being. And then also a challenge for counselors was that, where people were reaching out looking for answers, looking for guidance, where the reality was that even counselors and therapists hadn't dealt with a pandemic in this way. We've never been forced to isolate ourselves, and there are very few therapists who may have been exposed to similar type of work before, but there was definitely, an increase in people looking to their therapists for answers specifically about COVID and what they should do. Is this a conspiracy or not? How should I behave? What's best for me? And I think it was very difficult. It was a difficult phase for counselors in having to sort of navigate that in terms of, I want to help you, I want to support, I want to, assist you with managing your life. But this is also something that is new for me personally as well as professionally. Eventually, obviously, we were able to sort of help people or give support around their overall well-being, focusing on how they manage their anxieties, challenges, and so forth. But in the beginning, it was definitely a bit of a struggle. Work-life balance during lockdown. Does it even exist? Is the question that I would ask. Work-life balance has definitely been something that has been challenging, I think, for counselors, for therapists, for mental health professionals, but also just for the population at large. With schools being closed, so many people were home with their kids, and for many, many people, their kids were home, but they still needed to go to work at the supermarket or at the hospital, or if they were involved in any kind of food manufacturing or delivering, it was business as usual for them. So work-life balance, I think, is something that was severely impacted by COVID. And if we look at the pre-COVID times, work-life balance was already a struggle, and I think that struggle was just so amplified during COVID lockdown and so forth. And I think honestly, it continues to be a struggle. We're still in the midst of a second wave. There's been lots of uncertainty about when and how people will return to work. And in the meantime, people have had to convert garages and nurseries and little nooks in their houses to have a makeshift office. And it's been difficult for people to integrate work and home life, for example. So, people saying things like, I have this constant feeling of guilt. When I'm working at home, I can sort of see that my kids are needing my attention, that they're needing a meal, but I'm actually in a virtual meeting. Or I'm feeling severely overwhelmed by increased workloads and increased work demands, to the point where they're actually spending more and more hours working. Have a seat. Work-life balance. So definitely it's one of the major issues and concerns and constant struggles even today, is finding that work-life balance. There's lots of guilt. When I'm busy with work, I feel guilty that I'm not giving my family or household the attention that they need. And when I'm busy with my family, the constant ticking in your head about what work still needs to be done and when you're going to find the time or space to do it. And so there's definitely been a challenge with being present, either focused present with work or focused present with family and household. I think there have been many people who have reported that they've kind of found a new rhythm, that they were able to set up routines for their kids, for their families, for themselves, but there's still many people who crave the separation of work and home life. And that psychological split or breakaway from your home life and your work life is definitely something that is desired by many. So work-life balance, I will leave that as a question mark, and it remains to be seen whether that's possible at this stage. So if I look at what those we have helped have learned, or if I look at their shared experiences, the thing that stands out the most for me is the issue of gratitude. I think that so very many people have come to us to say, I'm feeling really anxious, I've been feeling depressed, I'm feeling completely overwhelmed with work. I haven't seen my parents in a year and it's really starting to take its toll. So they come with really challenging circumstances, but in the same breath, so many of them will say that, I have these challenges, but I'm also so cognizant of the things that I do have. So gratitude has been an almost consistent theme in spite of the challenges. So I think if we take away anything from COVID and lockdown, is that there's definitely more of a focus on gratitude and being grateful for the things that we do have, the relationships that we do have, and also that people are saying they want to place appropriate value in those things. So they want to value their personal relationships more. They want to value almost the blessings that they do have, or the positive things in their lives more, and focus less on what they don't have, what they're not doing. And so, that's definitely a major takeaway. And that's come through in so many conversations that I've had with clients, with colleagues, with friends, with family members. And so that's definitely a major takeaway. My message, so obviously so many people have been working from home with their children. I mean, there's so many videos on social media about kids interrupting meetings and running around with nappies and things like that. And that's been a major adjustment, challenge, and again, blessing in that you are able to connect with your kids in a way that you've never before, that you are physically in each other's space for longer periods of time, which again has had its own benefits, but it definitely also has had its challenges. Israel, what was it like during COVID to be at home with mommy and daddy all the time? Thumbs up. So what was good about it? Speak to the camera. Yeah. What was good about lockdown? Give this to me. What was good about lockdown? Why did you give it a thumbs up? Okay, we camera shy. So we definitely got a thumbs up from this one to say that it was good to be home with mommy and daddy during lockdown and during COVID. And then I think my second question would be, what would you like? No, that doesn't make sense. So we got a thumbs up from her. What was it like with mommy working at home all the time? Thumbs up, thumbs down, or in between? Thumbs down. So I anticipated that there would be a thumbs down because, she's very vocal. This is not normally how she is, but she's very vocal in terms of expressing that, when are you done working? When can we play? When can we do a craft? Can you come watch a movie with me? And again, just the battle of having to say, you know what, I've got to focus on work for now. I need 3 more hours, or I need 2 more hours. And so it's definitely been a struggle and a challenge. And we're still navigating that every single day. The short message that I would like to share with South Africa is that I hope we remain realistically optimistic about the situation, and that we will hold on to the lessons that COVID has taught, that we will continue the practices that brought us joy during the lockdown, that we will continue investing in our relationships, for example, even when we get to a time where we are able to sort of return to the normal way of life. And so I definitely feel like my wish is that South Africans would hold on to the lessons that they've learned and the positives that did come from COVID-19, the pandemic, and lockdown. So in terms of coping strategies that counselors have used, I think it has definitely been important to find a way to connect with other counselors. I think just having a platform where you're able to discuss and say, this is what I'm currently being presented with. What has worked for some of your clients? How have you dealt with some of the challenges that you've experienced? And so I think there was probably more reaching out, that counselors were calling each other directly for support more. I know that I certainly was, contacting other therapists or counselors more to say, how are you dealing with this? How has it worked? Initially, lots of discussion about virtual counseling and the challenges that did present, although it was a good way to connect. So one of the coping mechanisms was definitely reaching out to other professionals who are in who were in the same situation. So that was definitely there. I think that the pandemic has affected children and adults in similar ways, but also in different ways. I think that for adults, the takeaway, or so many parents have said, you know what, although their kids are struggling and they're challenged by the pandemic and being inside, they're actually quite surprised with how resilient their kids have been, and how flexible they've been, and how they've sort of just rolled with the punches, and that they were able to find a new routine, a new way of living, and that they've adjusted so easily, or more easily than a lot of adults. So I do think that there's some shared experiences that, both adults and children miss their friends, miss their social activities, would like to return to those. But there's also other instances where children seem to have been a little bit more resilient and flexible than the adults have.